Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time. Welcome to the Triple N Network, while you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Now, let's revisit an ink today, shall we? I'll be re-reviewing this ink that I first reviewed, God, like a bajillion years ago, by which I mean like 1.5. But, yeah, this was one of my earliest ink reviews, and I actually don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this line right here, where the ink in the bottle stops, because I actually have a bottle of it. This is Diamine's Wild Strawberry, and this is the plastic 30 milliliter bottle. And yeah, when I last reviewed this ink, several things were different. Let me think. I had no Fabriano, and what else didn't I have? Oh, I had a completely different 20-pound paper, and on that piece of paper, I think it even says, "I'm feeling very Joni Mitchell right now. I didn't know what I had till it was gone," because if you've seen my last review of this ink, it did very well on that 20-pound paper. I just didn't know that that was awesome 20-pound paper. Now I have the world's worst 20-pound paper, and there are some differences. But yeah, so the ink itself, Wild Strawberry. I've made no secret in the past that I hate pink, but I love this ink because this really isn't pink. It's an intense red. It's almost like a candy apple red. It's very intense. You don't really see pink in it. It's just a candy apple red. But yeah, it's I don't know if it's wild, but it's definitely intense, and quite enjoy it. Now, because I do have a bottle of it, I didn't feel I had to be quite so sparing with it like I do with many samples. These were the pens that I used. Now, these, no, they are not Parker 51s. They are Hero 616s. And one of them is just the standard one you get out of the blister pack, so it's fine. It's a fairly fine nib, but not like a Japanese fine. And it is completely unaltered. It has not been smoothed or made wetter or anything like that. It's exactly how it came out of the box. Blister pack. And then I also used one of these. This is one of my 616s that I have altered. Just to show you the difference. I have actually broadened it, where I literally clipped the nib and then smoothed it out. And actually, this is not the exact one, I'm realizing now, because you might be able to see there's a bit of a slant to it. And it's actually not that broadened, so I guess I grabbed the wrong one. But yeah, one of the pens was an unaltered fine, and the other was one that I made broader and wetter. And we're going to see the contrast between the two today. Now, let's look at some comparisons. So here is Diamine Wild Strawberry, and here is Diamine Poppy Red, which is very similar. And in fact, if anything, the only thing I can say is like this is just more intense, and oddly, I think this actually has a little bit more yellow in it, or orange maybe, I don't know. Now, next up is Pilot's mixable, from their mixable cartridges, Red, which is an intense red, and this is actually a very aggressive ink. Yeah, it bled through 32-pound 100% cotton paper, but it is fairly similar. Again, I'd say this one maybe has just a little more like red on the pink side. This has a little bit more red, but kind of like on the orange side. Next up, Mont Blanc's Corn Poppy Red, which I'd say is kind of the same as before. It's darker. Again, maybe this one, the Wild Strawberry, has just a little bit more orange. And lastly, I have KWZ Grapefruit. Now this one is a little bit more orange, but also very intense. Also, yeah, this lighter, but yeah, it's an intense color. It's hard to find other inks that are quite that intense. Now, bear with me while I zoom in for chromatography. Let's see how this goes. It's never graceful. I always misjudge. There we go. Okay. All right. Now, as the one on the left said, this is the one that I let dry, and this is the one that I did the way you're supposed to. Now, you can tell where that initial line of ink was put, but not super clearly. You can see the dot, and then up through here, it is essentially just blank. And then you get into this very, like, Valentine's Day candy pink. And then here you get more into red, and then you actually get little hints of yellow up here. I'll bring it in closer in a minute so you can get a better look at that. And then here's where I let it dry, and it only dried for maybe 10-15 minutes. But you can see the dot is darker. It's resisting being pushed up, though a lot of it is being pushed up. And then kind of more of the same. The Valentine's pink, and then red, and then the yellow up the top. I'm going to try and... Do you see the little bits of yellow in there? Maybe it doesn't want to show up, but yeah, you get these little hints of yellow in there. So, there are the comparisons. Zoom back out. Now, here are some chemical tests, and yeah, spoiler alert, this ink sheens, but yeah. So water really got it moving. This is a very water-soluble ink. A lot of Diamine inks are. People forget that water-soluble inks are really easy to clean out of your pens with just water, which is rather nice. Now, this was interesting. This 1/3 bleach solution, it didn't get rid of it. It just turned it pink, and so where it was laid on heaviest, here in the smear, it actually just stayed darker and more pink. So I thought that was worth pointing out. Now, ammonia pen flush did get it moving, but yeah, it's ammonia, so it started to affect the integrity of the paper. Kind of the same with hydrogen peroxide. So yeah, it sopped that up pretty quickly. Now, onto the paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, this is a bright, intense red. It's really, you really don't feel pink in this. I say there's no shading, but I think there is. It's just kind of subtle. It's not as easy to see. Now, it is wet flowing. It is a 6 out of 10. It has some oomph behind it, and yeah, you feel it. Now, that unaltered fine took 10 seconds. The broader, wetter pen took 17, but I also want you to see how much ink is in that smear in both of them. This is a very well saturated ink. They did not skimp on the ink, and we get gold sheen. And actually, between this like bright candy apple red and this gold, it's yeah, it's a really nice pairing or contrast or whatever you want to call it. And here, I hope this shows up. We get a bit of a dark outline around the wettest parts in the writing with that broader pen, and where that is, we also get gold sheen. So I thought that was worth pointing out, but yeah, very well behaved. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. Or sorry, there is sheen, but yeah, this is something that this ink does. It makes messes. You get this wet, and it's going to be a bad day. It will really not remain, and it'll dye the page. And honestly, I'm surprised that that's as readable as it is, and in fact the camera is increasing the contrast of the writing, but decreasing just how much it has dyed the page. So yeah, that would not be a good thing that happened. You would be very upset because you would be left with a mess, but yeah. So here's Fabriano Echo Qua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. It's probably my favorite. The more I use it, the more I love it. It's great stuff. And it can really tend to handle inks that other papers, even Clairefontaine and Rhodia, struggle with sometimes, and can bring out qualities that often we wouldn't see again until Tomoe River. But yeah, here we got it. Fabriano has plenty of this gold sheen. See it all throughout. It's just haloing entirely around that broader, wetter pen. It's really gorgeous. It's a nice contrast. And comparatively, the dry times are pretty alright. I mean, for a wet flowing ink and a broader, wetter 616, we've got dry time so far 17 seconds, 18 seconds, and this is a well-saturated ink. I mean, you can see the density of color. You can't see the dots from the dot paper in there anymore. Yeah, it's really nice. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. All good in that regard. But we do have a mess. Yep. I finally invested in extra batteries. So, moving on. Yeah, it really dyed the page. I mean, actually on camera you can start to see where the fine was. In person, you can't really. It's just gone into the background. That broader, wetter pen, there is a little, but again, for some reason the camera is increasing the internal contrast, whereas it's kind of downplaying just how pink it's turned the page. This is pretty much the only time you'll really see the pink in this ink, is when you add water. Now, next up is Rhodia. It's an 80 gram per square meter paper. It's, I feel like everyone knows this stuff. It's got a ceramic coating added in the pressing process. Yeah, more of the same, really. The fine took 10 seconds to dry. The broader, wetter pen took 17. We don't get as much sheen as we did on the Fabriano, but we get about as much as we did on the Clairefontaine. We do see a little of it in the halo around the wettest parts of the writing, especially with that broader, wetter pen. You have this intense, bright red color. Yeah, it's wet flowing. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. We do get the sheen. And again, we get a mess. It really dyed the page. And in fact, if you look at this, the texture of the writing right here, I think that's something to do with the paper, because when you flip it over, you can see it's starting to come out the back. So that might be environmental factors. But yeah, it made a mess. That would not be the easiest thing in the world to recover. Now, next up is Tomoe River, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo. And here you really get that intense redness, and maybe that's just a quality of the cream colored paper. Whereas here it almost feels like you can see a little bit more of the oranginess. Here you get more of a red, which is rather nice. And here we just get tons of sheen. I mean, this reminds me of like the Chinese New Year parades, like in Chinatown in San Francisco, just like red and gold and just intensity, just crazy, crazy intense. But yeah, this paper does draw out shading and sheen and dry times and echo, and it did all of that. So that fine now took 16 seconds to dry. The broader, wetter pen took 22, which honestly, for an intensely saturated ink, for one that's wet flowing and a fairly wet pen, I mean, we've seen dry times on Tomoe River with similar kind of circumstances take longer than 30. I mean, that's really not bad. And lovely, lovely sheen. But as I said, there is some echo, because this is a bright, intense color. This is very thin paper. This is, what, 52 grams per square meter? So it's practically, what, like half of Clairefontaine or something? It's very thin, and where it's laid on thick, especially thick enough to leave this dark halo, you are going to get a bit of an echo, especially if you're sensitive to it. But again, that's a broad, wet pen. It's a wet flowing ink. It's very thin paper. I feel like there's a logic here. So, but yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread. Of course not, because it's Tomoe River. It just doesn't do that. Now, the camera isn't showing, again, which is weird, how much it dyed the page. A lot of times, this paper just lets ink slide away when you add more water. So, this isn't a surprise, especially because it's Diamine. It's very washable on paper that loves to let things wash away. But it did dye the page a little bit, and you do see the barest little hints of what was there. But again, the camera's sort of bringing that forward a little bit more, so. Now, for the next 3 tests, I just used the unaltered fine, except to write the name. And here is that world's worst 20-pound copier paper I was talking about before. I had no idea when I started out just how good I had it with that old 20-pound copier paper. What I wouldn't give for some of that stuff now, because this stuff that I'm using lately is a train wreck. It is quite possibly the worst paper I've ever encountered. And that is really, 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 really saying something. But that being said, so here we do get spread. The line width did increase. And we do get a woolliness. There is some woolliness in here. But we don't get crazy intense feathering. We don't get just, you know, intense, like, it doesn't turn into a mess. It absorbed pretty much instantly. I say here lots of feathering, but I'm really not seeing much feathering. So I don't know, maybe they receded or something? I don't know. There is a woolliness. I'm not going to deny the woolliness, but yeah. We do have this, though, which is a good bit can be seen through the back. This is what I call echo or show through, where you can see through the back what's on the front, but not necessarily because it's come out the back, that would be bleed, but because it's fully sunk into the paper. And so since it's fully sunk into the paper, that means it is closer to the back, and so you can get a hint of it. Now, that broader, wetter pen, yeah, that is bleed. That came out the back, you can tell because of how dark it is and how opaque it is. Here, it doesn't get like that, so it's not coming out the back. So considering how intensely saturated this is, the wet flowing, it's not as bad as it could have been. Honestly, when I decided I was going to retest this ink and I knew I was going to have to use this paper, I was expecting a disaster. And we got it in the water test. Like that's, I mean, look at what it did. Oh, that's a mess. But yeah, anyways, could be worse. There's absolutely no shading. There's no sheen left. Now, this paper freaks out when you add water. And boy howdy did it, because it did crazy things to the actual shape of the paper. And then it actually started to double over on itself. And it like half released, half didn't. So it does not look good, but just from this, I'd say maybe you could recover it. Would it be easy? No. But I mean, this is a more absorbent paper. More absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out. So, yay? Question mark? Next up is Mead Notebook Paper, which is incredibly common, especially for school children in the United States. Now, this stuff is the kind that you would find like in a lab book or a composition notebook, not the kind you'd find in a spiral notebook. This stuff very much has a texture similar to that of newsprint, which means that it's large pulp mash paper, which means that the fibers that they mush into paper are actually larger, which is terrible for fountain pens. Like if you've ever tried to, do the crossword, on your local newspaper using a fountain pen, it's a disaster, right? That's this stuff. However, or similar kind of texture. If we look here, we can see the line width on the Mead has not increased quite as much as the 20 pound, but then when we compare it to Tomoe River, we see that it has increased some. Now, again, we don't have any feathering, we don't have any shading. We do have a wooliness, and we do have some feathering, but honestly, it could be a lot worse. We still have a bright, intense color, and that's something we had on the 20 pound too. Sometimes more absorbent papers seem to suck the vibrancy out of an ink, but not wild strawberry. So it took 2 seconds to dry. We do have this though. We do have hints of stuff coming out the back. Little bits just made it to the other side. But yeah, and then because this is thin, I mean this is thinner than 20 pound paper, it's going to be easy to see something through it anyway. But I mean this is a wet flowing ink, it's a fine nib. I say here maybe a Japanese fine or Japanese extra fine, or even just a drier writing fine. Yeah, water test. This paper can seriously freak out when you add water, and I feel like this is one of those cases. It really changed shape intensely. You can see here these little like bits, the cones that are almost going up. It started to act like chromatography paper. It was trying to draw more of the water up the page, and so I actually had to sop it up fairly quickly. You can see it started to feather and explode, started to overlap. This would not be fun to try and recover. That would be a disaster. That would be a mess. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I hate because it's terrible, and then you pay a lot of money for it. Now, for some reason my dog is really angry. But yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess on here. Now, it's 4 seconds to dry. We still have an intense color, but we also have a lot of wooliness. Kind of like I was saying with the newsprinty type papers, the large pulp mash. That's what we have here. You can actually see the size and shape and placement of those little bits of fiber in there. That's where we get that really intense wooliness, and we get it in the writing as well. We can actually see the texture of the paper as it was mashed together. Not good looking. And that's also what leads to feathering, and feathering is actually feathering quite a bit, so that's ironic. Or is it? But yeah, we get a lot of bleed. And full-on bleed. The thing is, it's like a million tiny dots. And these actually not only came through the back, but several of them, and by several I mean a great deal of them, rendered onto the page below. So what does that mean? Not only would it be vastly uncomfortable to write on this side, but even if you only wrote on one side of each page, by the time you got to the next one, it'd be all over the back. Now, oh, look at that. Now this paper also can freak out when you add water, and this also started to act like chromatography paper. If you see up here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but you can see how the paper started to bow, And once again, tried to act like chromatography paper. It tried to like seep the water up the page, and I had to soak it up fairly quickly. But even still, as quickly as I sopped it up, it left a mess in its wake. I mean, it feathered, it exploded, it's starting to overlap. It's hideous looking. That would be a pain in the butt to try and recover. Yep. Well, anyways, there you go. There is Diamine's Wild Strawberry. It is an intense red. It is a bold color. It is a candy apple color. You get this beautiful gold sheen throughout. It is a bit wet flowing. It is not a pink. I almost didn't get this because I thought it was a pink. Now I'm really glad that I did. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Yeah. Check it out for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.